That is the ultimate Jewish statement. Who else would be running for his life, and would find something nice to say about the person or community or persons who are trying to kill them? Who else would have so much optimism? Who else would be able to see good in such darkness? Now, so where does the syndrome come in? The syndrome comes in, superficially the syndrome comes in, is this is not the time to like Nazis. I had a former student who wrote a doctoral dissertation, a Jewish girl wrote a doctoral dissertation explaining why the Nazis killed Jews. And it was all figured out. It made sense. Scientifically, it made sense. She was a student of mine when I first started. I was a young upstart. And she said to me, I don't believe in God. And she was such a religious girl. She was so frum, she was so tzniistic, she was fanatic about kosher. I said to her, why are you so religious? She says, just in case. Yeah. I'm not sure whether she believes now or not, but let me tell you, she has a beautiful mishpacha with Yiddish kinder.
That's called the foxhole syndrome.
Pardon me, So the first issue is, why would a person want to find virtue with someone who tries to hurt you, But there's another factor, and I think this is very true, and on some level, Jews are guilty of this. Jewish people need a problem. They need hardship. One of the worst places, I think it's true of all of mankind, but I think Jews are special in this way. You have the extreme measure. If life is good, they have to find something bad. It can't be good. It's got to be something wrong. If life is terrible, we find the silver lining. If life is bright, we find the cloud. I call this the Anne Frank syndrome. When life is terrible, you find something good about it. When life is wonderful, you have to think, you got to find a problem. This is a sickness. It's a sickness. And since we're talking about Jews, we'll call it a Jewish sickness. I'm not sure Jews have exclusive rights to this, but we certainly are very, very proficient. We're very good at creating imaginary problems where no real problems exist. And I think it's because the combination of characteristics that define us, which is that we're kind and gentle and forgiving. And a Yid came to my house for Shabbos. I'm sorry for digressing. Just a month and a half ago. Hanukkah time, with his wife and his family. They're close to us. And they brought us a cookbook from a kosher restaurant in Manhattan. So he's telling me the history of this kosher restaurant in Manhattan. It's owned by Goyim, non-Jews. And they dafka opened the kosher restaurant. And the story of why they opened the kosher restaurant was they had a Jewish chef. And the Jewish chef was trying to encourage them, going back 40 years, to make a kosher restaurant. And they were hesitating, and then they had trouble with the real estate, with the
Title.
the space that the lease was running out, and the owner of the land wanted to do something else with it, so they went kosher. But this Jewish chef who convinced them to go kosher had a story. What was the story? It's such a great story. It's a simple story that they went on vacation. And they left him in charge of the restaurant. And they said to him, every night you throw everything in the garbage. We don't need trouble with bad food and being lost. Every night, whatever food is left over, throw it in the garbage. Now, in a restaurant, when you produce food en masse, there's going to be a lot of garbage. Directly across from the restaurant, there was an old age home. So every night, he carried this food across the street, and he brought it in, and he said, listen here, I'm throwing this food in the garbage. It's good food. It's fresh food. It's expensive food. It's tasty food. Enjoy. And they would eat, except for one fellow. Now, the guy he never Magen David on his neck. He didn't denounce himself as a Jew. There was one man who refused, wouldn't eat. He says, why won't you eat? He says, because you're a Jew. He says, how do you know I'm Jewish? He says, only a Jew is going to care about throwing food in the garbage. He knew he was Jewish for the fact that he didn't want to throw the food in the garbage. Why should I waste it? Let somebody have it. So the problem becomes, when we don't have a center, one of these two characteristics becomes dominant. Either we become so soft and so pathetic that it's terrible. A person lives on this earth, and people punch him, and people hit him, and people beat him, and people kick him, and then he figures out that it's all his fault. Imagine that. All people do is attack him and hurt him, and it's my fault. I know what I'm doing wrong. I got to fix this, and then they'll stop doing it. And then you fix this, and they keep doing it. That's a disease. It's a disease that comes from softness, yeah? And then there's the other side of the coin. There's the other extreme. And the challenge of being a Yid is letting the Yid emerge healthy. And when the Yid emerged, I was listening to the therapist who talked to you earlier, he talked about boundaries. He talked about separation. Separation and boundaries, to some people, is meanness. To some people, it's a sign of a lack of closeness. Why do we need to have walls? And the answer, of course, is this is the only way to be two and to have a healthy relationship. These are things we learn. They're not naturally. Naturally, we're disposed towards one direction or disposed to another direction. Balance is difficult. Balance is difficult. And in order to have this correct balance, it takes a lifetime of learning. And I'm going to add, very, very importantly, that at the core of being a healthy Yid, who has the correct balance between a revolutionary and being soft and kind, is connection to God. Faith, in other words. Connection to something bigger than ourselves. If we don't have a connection to Hashem, and we allow these characteristics to express themselves as our nature is prone to express them, we're going to go in one extreme or another extreme. It's the story of the Jewish people. Faith for a Jew is very, very important. And again, faith, like a Jew, doesn't make sense. It's not a reasonable thing. It's transcendent. It's beyond reason. But faith is actually the credibility of everything. Having a connection to Hashem, and a connection to Hashem which is not based on our own mind and based on our own ego, but based on our ability to surrender to Hashem, is the ultimate act of courage. They like to call it the opium of the masses. It takes a lot of courage to believe. I've met many people who have told me, I wish I could believe, I can't. To surrender. Last Shabbos, I was in Virginia and we had a Fabrengen, and I was talking to a Jew who was looking for himself, and he was studying Torah and so on. And he was very excited about Chabad and all the other stuff. So I asked him about faith. And he took a double take. He stopped. And he thought, that word makes me very uncomfortable. I said, that's exactly why I'm asking the question. Because the connection to God is the rudder. The connection to ideas which are bigger than us is the equilibrium that creates a balance between these two basic poles. Or to say it in other words, Torah and mitzvahs anchor us. Learning Torah, keeping Shabbos, keeping kosher, wearing tefillin. A lot of people are going to argue they're mundane, they're superficial, they're ritualistic, they're mechanical. But these mitzvahs create the framework for the emergence of the neshama to have the right balance, to know when Rachmanis is in order and to know when Gevura is in order. It has to come from outside of us. Because if it comes from us, it's going to be one or the other. It's not going to be both. So this is what it comes down to. This is what it comes down to. Why do you have to learn Torah? Why do you have to do mitzvahs? Why do you have to be a Jew practically and behaviorally? And the answer to all of those questions is you need to feed the neshama. You need to feed the neshama so that the neshama can create the right balance, the healthy balance in what a human being is, what a Yid is, what a human being is, what a Yid is. I just want to say one more thing and I'm going to close. Okay, I want to just finish. All of us are in love with Viktor Frankl. Why? Because he was on the video of Jem. And we're all so simplistic. He met the Rabbi liked him. Superman, Viktor Frankl, was a psychiatrist. Viktor Frankl was not Moses. He wasn't. He's married to a non-Jew. But the story of Viktor Frankl is a very powerful story. It's a great story. It's a very great lesson. And it's a lesson worth refocusing on and celebrating. But I'm going to give you one introductory thought, one prefatory thought, then I'll tell you the story, make my point, and get off the stage. Last weekend, I was in Virginia. And the topic that I was given was how to change the world. A guy from Brooklyn speaks English with an accent. How to change? What a ridiculous topic. I mean, when a person gives you a topic like that, the good news is nobody expects you to deliver. How many people? But I wrote a talk. And of course, I'm not changing the world. I articulated ideas that we see in the Rebbe's teaching over and over again. And I developed a pretty good talk. I was pretty proud of it, actually. And one of the things that I said, and again, none of these were my original ideas. It came from the Rebbe's teachings, the Rebbe's wisdom, is one of the most basic mistakes in revolution. When people revolt, when people rebel against what they don't like, they don't know what they do like. They only know what they don't like. If you make a revolution and destroy what is, and don't have what to replace it with, you end up creating a worse scenario than the one you had originally. If you want to break down a system, what they called in